And get down to business. There was an eagerness on part of several people that this meeting take place last week. However, the request for the meeting was not made to me until Sunday, November the 10th. House Rule 14.24, a copy of which you will find in your folder, clearly requires a minimum of 7 days' notice to the committee members in public during the interim. 7 days from Sunday the 10th would have been Saturday, November 16th. However, take into account that the 10th was a Sunday, the 11th was Veterans Day, which is a state holiday. So the notice could not have gone out to the committee members in public until Tuesday, November 12th. 7 days from the 12th is today. As you all know, we are here to get an update on the performance-based contracting process for our CPRA. Some of our members have indicated an interest in the program, and I scheduled a meeting as soon as I possibly could for that purpose. I thought it best to have Mr. Chip Klein, Executive Assistant to the Governor for Coastal Activities, come and explain the program and answer any questions the committee members might have. Mr. Klein.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I would like the opportunity to read a statement into the record, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Haas, who will outline the process and give you an update on the performance-based contracting, and then ask Mr. Block to make some additional comments, if that's okay.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to be here today to outline CPRA's performance-based contracting process. Since our creation in 2005, CPRA has enjoyed a consistent record of ethical and transparent procurement processes. And today, we're here to stand by that record and answer any questions that you may have. Unfortunately, our performance-based contracting program, which was passed unanimously by the House and the Senate, got caught in the crosshairs of the governor's election, all for the sake of political theater. I think everyone in this room would agree that the coastal program is arguably the single most endeavor that we are undertaking as a state. To so casually jeopardize our integrity as an agency is careless, short-sighted, and frankly unacceptable to me. If I may, I'd like to remind this committee and those watching online that the CPRA was formed as a result of catastrophic impacts to our state. The Louisiana legislature painstakingly created an agency and an organizational structure that would perform efficiently, effectively, and ethically to protect and restore our coast. As you've heard us say before, there is no optimal solution to the coastal crisis we face. There is no one approach that could possibly make every stakeholder group happy or whole. Because of this difficult reality and the dire predictions for our future, CPRA looks to the best available science to guide us in our implementation decisions. The fact that we rely on science and a transparent process for developing our plans, coupled with the fact that we do not make our investments in a political or partisan matter, is what gives our public the confidence that we are making the right decisions for our coast today and tomorrow. Moreover, we can only build the projects we need when we have the funding available to do so. Securing this funding also means standing on our results and on our credibility. The day CPRA stops being recognized and as an organization that acts on strong science is the day that we put future investments at risk. As we speak, members, Senator Cassidy's bill to increase the amount of GOMESA revenues that are returned to the Gulf-producing states for coastal protection and restoration is being marked up in committee. We have no case in Washington, D.C. to receive a greater share of these dollars if it is believed that our coastal investments are being politically or unethically driven. And so Brent and I are here today to provide an overview of the performance-based contracting legislation, the procurement process, and CPRA's diligent efforts to follow the law as outlined by the Louisiana legislature. But before I turn it over to Bryn, Mr. Chairman, I hope every person in this room and those listening on the broadcast will hear me say this. I understand politics, and I understand that political campaigns can become heated and sometimes nasty. But the political ad that is at the center of this oversight hearing is false. These are the facts. The initial ad that was run was false. The subsequent edited ads were false. Governor Edwards has never, not once, not a single time, asked me to consider someone for a contract or directed me to issue a contract of any kind to anyone. And no one received a contract under this delivery mechanism or is currently in line or well positioned to get this work. This ad was aimed at our governor. And as someone who works for the governor and sees how he conducts himself every day, and the fact that he holds everyone in his administration to the highest ethical standards, obviously I took issue with it and was extremely frustrated. But ads like these don't just call into question the integrity of the governor. They call into question the integrity of the entire coastal program of this state. Mr. Chairman, there are over 160 men and women who work in the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Men and women who go to work every day and pride themselves on doing things the right way and for the right reasons. They represent the best of state government. They have shown time and time again that they are committed to doing things in the most transparent and inclusive manner. And perhaps most importantly, Mr. Chairman, they have worked tirelessly over the last 14 years to garner broad bipartisan support that has transcended multiple gubernatorial administrations. Simply put, Mr. Chairman and members, false allegations like these jeopardize the trust that is at the heart of our entire coastal program. I'll now ask Mr. Hawes to walk us through the outcome-based performance contracting legislation, the procurement process we undertook, and a status update on where we are as it relates to the outcome-based performance contracting of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Klein. Mr. Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Chairman Bishop, appreciate it. Members of the committee, thanks for allowing us to be here to speak today. As you're aware,
I don't want to interrupt you, but please state your name for the record. We know who you are, though.
I'm Brent Hawes. I'm the Executive Director of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. As this committee, I believe, is aware, CPRA was given the authority to enact outcome-based performance contracting as a project delivery method by act of the legislature in 2017, and, of course, signature of the governor at that time. It's really intended to leverage the efficiency, the potential for innovation, and the capacity of private entities to both finance and implement projects in the near term with payment for successful project delivery over the longer term. This, of course, can allow CPRA to use future funding to implement projects today. There are really three key characteristics of outcome-based performance contracting. The first one of those is the clear definition of performance criteria and objectives by which projects can be measured. The performance of those projects are measured. Of course, a clearly defined assessment methodology and collection of data on the performance criteria to assess that performance. And then a schedule of consequences for the contractor that's delivering that project, such as provisions of awards, impositions of performance adjustments that could include clawbacks based on meeting those criteria, of course. So in accordance with the process set forth in statute, CPRA issued a request for statements of interest and qualifications, or an RSIQ, in June 22nd of 2018 to seek qualified proposers to deliver restoration projects in coastal Louisiana through the outcome-based performance contracting delivery method. This was a public call. It was open to any interested parties that felt they were qualified to deliver a restoration project through this unique delivery method. 6 teams submitted qualifications based on that RSIQ. All 6 of those teams were evaluated, and all 6 were determined to be qualified to move on to the next step in the process. So in that second step of the process, again outlined in statute, CPRA issued a request for proposals, or an RFP, on March 15th of this year for outcome-based performance contracts to develop and deliver large-scale marsh restoration projects. All 6 of those teams that submitted on the RSIQ were invited to submit on the RFP, and 4 of those teams chose to do so. This, of course, is the portion of the process where submitting teams actually make formal proposals outlining costs, technical approach, land rights, sediment sources, and so forth in terms of how they're going to deliver the project. Proposals submitted for the RFP were rigorously evaluated, scored, and ranked by a review committee. Following that evaluation, CPRA determined that it would not be advantageous to the state of Louisiana to move forward with award under this solicitation. This decision was primarily based on the significantly higher cost of each project proposal compared to the traditional design bid build project delivery method that's typically used by CPRA. The Louisiana Natural Resources Damage Assessment Trustee Implementation Group, or TIG, which includes Trump administration officials and administers the proposed funding source for outcome-based performance contracting projects, also evaluated these proposals concurrently with CPRA and concurred with our decision not to move forward with an award. Letters notifying the four proposers of CPRA's decision not to move forward with an award on the RFP were issued on August 12th of this year. A public announcement of that decision was made at the August 21st, 2019 CPRA board meeting. This presentation was made in a public setting and outlined the entire process from start to finish. I would encourage anyone interested in viewing that presentation that it can be accessed via the state legislature's archives. All of that being said, I want you to know that CPRA is committed to this project delivery method. We do believe that the private sector has the potential to bring significant technical and financial resources to bear in coastal Louisiana. And so as it became clear that we would not make an award during this solicitation, during this process, we invited all 6 qualified proposers, those that submitted on the first step, the RSIQ, to individual roundtable discussions with CPRA to explore the reasons for the high cost of project delivery. These roundtables were held in September and October of this year. And through these meetings, several factors included in the solicitation were determined to have significantly influenced project costs. Those include, obviously, the transfer of risk from CPRA to the proposers, including the clawback provisions that I referred to earlier. The geographic area for this proposal was limited to the Barataria Basin. Things like land rights and oyster acquisition, and also the means of project financing were things that we have found to have increased those project costs. So based on these roundtables, we're currently contemplating restructuring a new RSIQ and RFP process to reduce risk to proposers and CPRA, and in turn lower cost and get a better value for the state of Louisiana. To be clear, this solicitation is canceled. CPRA did not award a contract and does not intend to under the solicitation, as evidenced by the notification letters I mentioned earlier, the public announcement at our board meeting that I mentioned as well, and honestly our actions since that time, this agency's actions since that time. In closing, I'll say that this entire process has been performed in the public eye. It's been open to anyone interested in participating, and it's been carried out in the best interest of the state of Louisiana. I know I can speak for Mr. Klein when I say that you have our word that any other actions taken by this agency will be carried out in like manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman, members. Matthew Block, the Governor's Executive Council, and I just have a couple of points I want to make. I'll be quick. First, I'm happy to say I look forward to working with most of you for the next 4 years, and so I'm happy to be here and to say that. Secondly, it's disappointing, though it's not particularly surprising, but it's disappointing that the individuals who are behind these ads, who leveled these allegations, are not here today to air their grievances or their perceived grievances in public. Mr. Grigsby and Senator Appel, who are the individuals behind those ads, are not here today to answer your questions or to defend their allegations. That's disappointing, but we're gonna move forward. And as you can see, that the administration is here on behalf of the governor, on behalf of CPRA, to transparently answer any questions, all questions. We'll sit here all day, as long as you want to answer anything that you may have to ask about this program. As many of you know, the initial version of this ad was pulled down, not voluntarily, but by the TV stations as untrue. It was resubmitted with a change of verbiage, and then there was a lawsuit that was filed and a judge ordered it down that was untrue. You can go a whole campaign cycle nationwide and have a handful of ads get pulled down. This one got pulled down twice in a week. It's when this ad was pulled down and then this hearing was called, the hearing being called last week allowed for another ad to be submitted, which basically said that this matter was under investigation by several legislators. So at that point in time, as I hope all of you know, pursuant to the governor's request, the governor actually asked for this hearing to be last week. This hearing to be held before the election on Friday of last week. So I submitted a letter to Chairman Bishop and to Chairman Chabert of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, asking for, if this hearing was going to take place, let's air it out before the election. Let's let the public hear what the allegations are. Let's have the public hear what the defense of this was. I understand the rule, and the chairman and I spoke on a couple of different occasions about the House rule about timing. That is certainly a rule that has been waived many times in the past. I did not receive a response to my letter asking for this to be heard last week, and obviously it was not heard last week, and we're here today, and that's fine. I'm appreciative that the chairman kept the meeting for today so that we can have this discussion in public. But this letter was sent requesting this last week because, as Mr. Klein and Mr. Haas both said, this administration has nothing to hide about this at all, nothing to be embarrassed about. This was a procurement that was done completely on the up and up. It was done in the best interest of the state. And frankly, it's insulting to the administration and to the people working at CPRA to suggest that there was something done improper. When I sat up here, I signed my name to a card that said I'm swearing to tell the truth. I can say with full confidence that this administration never, ever, ever puts our finger on the scale on procurement. We don't go to our agency heads and say, you need to make sure this procurement turns out this way to hire this person. We've had plenty of people who are friends who are disappointed in the way procurements turn out because we don't do that. I can't speak to what happened in previous administrations, and it's frankly irrelevant to me what happened in previous administrations. I know that we don't, and that's not what happened here. And I think upon questioning, you'll see that that's exactly what did not happen here in this particular procurement. It is one of the few charges that can be leveled in politics when there's literally a charge that a deal was done, when there is a letter predating the charge stating that this individual did not get a contract. There is a letter dated, what, August?
August 12th.
August 12th from Mr. Haas to Mr. Starkle stating you didn't get a contract. That letter is well known. I assume it was known to the people leveling these charges, but they were leveled anyway. And that's disappointing. But again, politics is politics, and we get it. That's the way we all work. The governor understands this. But the last point I want to make is this. I'm sure there were a lot of people that were high-fiving each other saying, boy, what an effective ad this was when it was produced. Fortunately, the TV stations and the court saw otherwise. But when you level a charge like this against the governor, that's fine. The governor's running for office. He's a big boy. He can handle it. But you're not just questioning his integrity. You're questioning the integrity of the people who work for him. You're questioning the integrity of these two gentlemen to my left and the other people who work for state agencies. You're saying that they're in on it, that they are part of some conspiracy to do something improper. They don't deserve it. It's not true, it's false, and they don't deserve it. They're here trying to do what is going to be the biggest battle of our lifetimes, which is to restore the very coast of this state. That's what they wake up every day trying to do. And it's unfair, and it's not right for their integrity to be challenged in the middle of a campaign trying to score some political points. I'll be happy to answer any questions any of you may have.
Mr. Block, I would like to point out to you that my job as chairman of this committee and my job as a member of the House of Representatives is to follow the rules. And I understand your aggravation with it, and I spoke to you after I got your letter.
You did?
And you just said to suspend the rules. To suspend the rules, it takes a 2/3 vote of all members while we are in session. So I am going to follow the rules, because otherwise then somebody's going to question my integrity. So I'm sorry you feel that I should have done it on Friday, but I followed the rules by the book.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that you, as chairman of the committee, have the ability to suspend the rules. And so I don't want you to think that I'm saying that should have been done by you. I just will point out that within the last 4 years, that rule on the notice of committee certainly has been suspended on a number of times, and it does not need to be done during session. But I get the points you're making, and I referenced that rule in my letter, so I don't want anybody to be under the misconception that I didn't know what the rules were. I know exactly what the rules were. I referenced the rule in my letter, and the only point I was making in my letter is if we're going to air this out, let's air it out in full public before the election. It didn't happen, and that's fine, and we're here today, and I'm not crying over spilled milk. I just wanted to point out what was put in my letter.
Thank you, sir. The board is clear. Representative Brown with a question.
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say that I'm very much aware of this situation, what went on. It's not new to politics. And when I first ran for public office, I was gaining on a well-funded incumbent. And so they decided that it would be great to create the Southern Gay Political Action Committee and have me endorsed by them. They didn't exist. There was no registration with the Secretary of State's office. But nothing has been done about that. We still allow that stuff to go on. We need to have the Ethics Commission look into these kind of allegations so that they don't happen again, and make sure that there's consequences to people's actions when they come out with these types of statements that they know are not true, and yet they run with the stories. And it happens in every campaign, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. It happens to them. And we need to quit that stuff. We need to look at what is reality and try to select what's best for the state of Louisiana. I have all indications that that's what you folks did. And I knew that this was going on. I was made aware of it immediately, and I was disappointed, but I was not surprised. But we need to make sure that if we're going to have ethics reforms, that we include these in those reforms, that those people who project these falsehoods are punished for making false statements. And it's a mess. It's a mess in politics. And you have to have thick skin. And I was told that if I couldn't stand the heat, I needed to get out of the kitchen. Well, those people do not deserve to be in public office if they are allowing this to continue to happen. I thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative White.
Mr. Klein.
Yes, ma'am.
It's my understanding that some people keep saying that Mr. Starkle's firms was given special treatment based on his relationship with the governor. But wasn't his firm ranked third in the choices?
So two things, Representative White. I think it's important to remember that under the initial RSIQ, which was the first step in this process, anyone in this room, anyone driving up and down I-10 right now could have submitted a statement of interest or their qualifications to participate in this delivery mechanism. We received 6. All 6 of those firms, all 6 of those teams that were submitted were moved to the second round for this delivery mechanism. Under that stage in the process, where the firms were actually submitting their financing, where were they going to get their settlement from, their land rights, really the nuts and bolts of the project specifics, we scored those, as Mr. Haas just outlined in his remarks. And again, no contract was awarded, but if a contract were to be awarded, it would not have gone to Mr. Starkle's firm because he was ranked third out of the 4 teams that ultimately submitted an actual bid for the project. So no contract was awarded. No firm is currently in line to get work or well positioned to get work because the solicitation has been canceled. Additionally, if a contract were to be awarded, if we did feel that it was in the best interest of the state and the citizens of the state to go ahead and award a contract under this delivery mechanism, it would not have gone to Mr. Starkle's firm because he was ranked third out of the 4 teams that submitted. That is a public record. The scoring of those proposals are also a public record, were presented in a public board meeting to the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority Board in August of this year. So to answer your question, no ma'am, he would not have received a contract.
Well, it was my understanding that a former executive director, Mr. Ellison, made a statement that confirmed the validity of the ad. What is your response to that statement?
So, Representative White, Mr. Ellison was executive director of CPRA for 4 months. 4 months. Mr. Ellison resigned his position as executive director of CPRA for reasons that I will not state on this microphone. His statement is reflective of the way he thought the program should have been run. And upon Mr. Ellison's departure from our agency, we immediately began making tweaks to the program. We immediately began re-looking at the law that you all passed that outlines the process by which we are required to follow if we were going to award a contract, and the solicitations that we would need to go through in order to get to that point in the process. It is our interpretation of the law, it is our policy as an agency that if a solicitation is canceled, we will start from scratch. So Mr. Ellison's statement insinuated that there were a select few firms that were well positioned to be qualified and in the queue to receive this work. Again, a false statement. The process, the complete process, will start over from an RSI queue if, in fact, we decide that we're going to go out for another round of solicitations. Again, an RSI queue, anyone in this country can submit their qualification and their interest to be considered for this program. And again, there wasn't even a weeding out of those proposals because all 6 of them were moved forward to final consideration. So I would wholeheartedly reject and disagree with Mr. Ellison's statement.
And one other thing, Mr. Chairman, after, the election is over. So if there's no further statements, I'd like to adjourn this meeting.
I will put that on the record. We still have a few more questions. Representative DeVilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions, and I may have to bounce around a little bit because I was just writing them down in different areas. Can you kind of give me a quick overview of what the outcome-based contract means?
You want to hear that, man?
Sure. So it's as I mentioned in my my opening remarks, it's an alternative delivery method for delivering projects, getting taking advantage of private sector's efficiency and financing and ability to get projects on the ground today using out-year funding, essentially. There is some risk involved, of course, from the contractor's perspective, in that the projects that they deliver have to meet certain requirements. They have to perform in order for them to get paid, essentially, for delivering those projects. So that's really it in a nutshell.
So how often has the outcome-based contracts been used in the past?
This is CPRA's first attempt to implement a program through outcome-based performance contracting. I can't speak for other agencies.
So as far as CPRA goes, y'all haven't actually produced any projects through that?
Not through this alternative delivery method, no, sir.
And how long have y'all been trying to do it, since 2018?
Yes.
The legislation was actually passed in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So
right.
they gave us the authority to enter into this contracting mechanism. But Representative DeVilla, I will point out that the outcome-based performance contracting mechanism has been used in other parts of the country, North Carolina, Florida, and I believe in the state of Washington. So it has been a successful mechanism to get large-scale ecosystem restoration projects on the ground.
So, I mean, it's my understanding that our committee is tasked with the oversight to these types of legislations, and of course, the CPRA as a whole. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, that's kind of what I think my view is of this meeting. Who has oversight of the outcome-based contract?
Ultimately, I do.
You do. Okay,
Yes,
but y'all have none that are actually out right now and have been awarded?
No, sir.
Okay. When y'all spoke about the RSIQ, I know that's an acronym. How many other states use the RSIQ?
I can't speak to that. I'm not aware of how many other states would use that.
So what's the need to have more than one way of submitting out maybe an RFP and RSIQ? Why do you have to have both?
Well, Representative Villa, I don't want my answer to seem as if I'm being flippant with you, but it was outlined in the legislation that gave us the authorization to provide or to undertake a performance-based contract. The legislation that was passed specified an RSIQ step and an RFP step. So it was in the bill.
In House Bill 596?
I believe that's the correct number, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So through this legislation, we as legislators were directing your department on how the bidding process should go.
Yes, sir. I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. Do you feel, and I mean this is just a question, do you feel that that's the best method, is to have more than one way of just allowing people to bid on projects that are outcome based? Do you think that's, if no other states use it, which y'all don't know if any do you think it's the best path forward?
Well, I do think it's another tool in our toolkit, Representative. And so, as many of you know, any time that we're in front of the House Natural Resources Committee or Transportation Committee or Appropriations Committee, the question that we get every single time is, how are we utilizing the private sector and bringing them into the fold to restore and protect our coast? And this was one option, one tool in our toolkit that we could pursue to achieve that. And so I do think it's a viable option, but there are other considerations that we could do to make again, with what we're doing internally, to look at how we could perhaps tweak the program to ultimately make it successful and actually award a contract that allows for a project to be implemented.
Can I, because I think your question is more directed to the RSIQ RFP process, is it not?
That's correct.
So I think there's a certain logic to doing it that way, and again, it was in legislation that passed unanimously in the House and Senate. But part of the idea behind the RSIQ process is there are going to be various different ways that companies approach projects. And so when the RSIQ process takes place, you can then tailor the RFP to maybe certain project ideas that come forward in the RSIQ process that can then be more competitively bid in the RFP process. I think that the idea is that there's not just going to be one way that these projects can be accomplished. So I think this provides for better ideas to come forward from the project bidders to come forward in this process, rather than a straightforward RFP process where the agency sets forth all the parameters at the front end. This allows for companies to come in and say, this is an alternative way in which we would potentially propose to do this project. So I think that's the idea behind the RSIQ RFP process.
I mean, we would agree that the more people that are, I guess, available to bid on these projects, the more competitive it would be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And everyone is available to take part in the RSIQ process.
So the RSIQ went out in June 22nd, 2018, correct?
Yes.
Is that request now closed?
Yes.
So only those individuals that were approved, which 6 applied, 6 approved, can now bid on?
No. The entire solicitation is canceled.
So it starts over again?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So the individuals that were approved by the process, are they still approved?
No.
Currently, no.
Okay, so that goes away.
There's no process now. I mean, we're back to where we were before the RSIQ was issued.
Okay. As far as an oversight committee goes, when you look, y'all have some sort of rubrics that you use to select those that apply, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Would it be possible for us to receive the applications to look at the rubrics of those that applied and how you basically total the numbers to see? You said one firm was ranked number 3rd or number 3, that we can actually see the process that you used.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Who evaluates the applications?
So at the RSIQ step, which again is the step where we qualify firms to be invited on to the next step, it was a team of CPRA staff.
Is that the qualified? That's the qualification review committee.
Yes.
Can you give me the names of those that are on that committee?
I can't off the top of my head, but I can
You
certainly.
cannot?
I cannot off the top
How
of my
many
head.
people are on it?
I believe we had.
I'm sorry, I don't know who's speaking now.
I'm sorry, Maury Chatelier with CPRA.
Please come to the table, Mr. Shadler.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Maury Chatelier with CPRA. For the RSIQ review, Brent's correct, it was internal CPRA staff. There were, I'm going to wing it here, 7 individual members from different divisions within the agency, all having different expertise that could speak and look at qualifications of these proposers from different areas: engineering, project management, environmental.
Would y'all happen to have brought, the 6 different applicants and showed how they were chosen through that rubrics with y'all today?
No, we don't have that today. But all 6 of the proposers under the RSIQ process were advanced to the next step in the process. So they were all qualified to move forward.
Okay. You had said in June 22nd, 2018 was when you sent out the RSIQ. When did the bid period close?
60-day period.
It was I can't give you an exact date on it. It was approximately 60 days.
Yes.
For the RSIQ.
For the RSIQ.
And I would assume when it closed, that's whenever you announced the successful proposers, so to speak?
After it closed, we put the committee together, and we had our allotted time for review for the individual members to look at and review the proposals. And we got together, some via conference call, some internal, and we put a review together and came to the conclusion that all were qualified.
And then next would be the RFP.
Correct.
What was the timeline between that 60-day and then the RFP going out? Or what is the typical timeline? If we're just talking as far as oversight on this process.
The RFP was under development during the advertisement of the RSIQ, so it was not sitting on a shelf waiting to go out. So there was a time frame following the RSIQ submittal while we were still completing the RFP.
The RFP itself was advertised on March 15th of this year.
Is there a period of time whenever, let's say, your department and bidders are not allowed to actually talk?
It's a blackout period, yes, sir.
Right. So what can you give me a little bit more about what a blackout period is?
Go ahead, Brent.
During an active advertisement or solicitation like this, there would typically be a blackout period where we would not obviously discuss the solicitation with any.
What's the reason? I'm sorry, discuss what?
Discuss the solicitation, the RFP, for example.
And what's the need to have a blackout period? What's the reason?
Well, it's so that we don't compromise the process.
Okay. I wasn't going to bring this up, but since Mr. Block brought it up, he had mentioned someone by the name of Starkle, which I'm familiar with the ad that you were referring to. Do you know if any of these individuals that were chosen in the RSIQ process, if any of those had any contact with any staff from CPRA, maybe before your time to today, about this legislation? Any of those that were chosen?
About the legislation?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you looked at the members of the team of the 6 that were submitted, these are individuals, firms, entities that have vast experience in restoration and protection projects. So there were conversations with a multitude of firms as the legislation moved throughout the process. I do think it's worth noting, Representative Villiers, that when we're talking about individuals making an actual submittal, either in the RSIQ or the RFP, I want to be careful there because it's not an actual individual. There is a primary point of contact that represents a whole host of firms and businesses and entities that have vast expertise in restoration and protection efforts. So as you referenced Mr. Starkle, he was one individual on a whole host of about 7 to 8 different entities that made up a team. It wasn't just one individual that we deemed to be qualified to submit.
He made up a team or a business?
A team that consisted of multiple businesses.
Okay. So, and again, I'm just trying to get clarification on that because y'all had mentioned this guy's name. I'm kind of hearing you say that everyone that submitted the RFP or RSIQ had some involvement in basically bringing this forward as far as just getting some back and forth conversation, making sure that we were all on the same page, whether it was through your department and the legislature allowing, I guess, the most amount of qualified people to be able to participate.
When you say bringing what forward, the legislation?
Yes,
or
House Bill 596?
I think that there were conversations with firms that were included in firms that actually made a submittal, and then there were conversations with private sector firms that ultimately did not participate in this. And so, as I stated earlier, look, we as a state agency can't do this alone. We've got to rely on the expertise of the private sector if we're going to be successful in the restoration and protection of our coast, and that's something that I'm committed to doing, and bringing the best minds from around the country into our fold to make sure that we're doing things the right way. And if there are delivery mechanisms that we're not thinking through right now in the coastal program, well, then I want to know about them. And I want to talk to the experts in this country that can inform those decisions, inform those delivery mechanisms.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And I mean, look, moving forward, I'm sorry that the things that were said or that went out during the campaign went out. I will say that as our committee and as important as it is to have coastal restoration, I feel like we need to have a little more involvement in the process as far as when y'all are seeing individuals submitting to be bidders and what have you, how those individuals are chosen, and then of course actually getting something done. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative White.
First of all, I want to ask, is the governor in any way related to Mr. Starkle?
No, ma'am.
So then if we were to pursue this any further, we need to change our nepotism laws, right?
I would leave that up to the legislature, but I would agree.
As I understand it, because I talked to the ethics attorney about it, what about this particular job, these projects require investors.
That's right.
Big investors that's willing to work with these as they pay ahead for the performances, and we base their performances on what we pay them in return. So we're not having to come up with a lot of money to get these things done, because that's a part of the process. When they apply, they've got to be lined up with investors that are able and willing to do the job and know that they've got to come in with production, an expectation, a pay for performance that we all voted on, co-chaired by our chairman, and even though that it has not been completed as a project done yet, I think the integrity of it, as it was explained by my colleague Philip DeVilliers, all the answers that were there in this act number 356, and it defined all of that, the dates, the times, the who, the where, the withal, and I just think it would be sad to pass up on any opportunity with anyone that has done their homework, that has spent years and years of expertise in this field, that is not related to anyone here, that has the investors willing to take a chance on us rebuilding our coastline, as I understand it. Again, I will say the election is over. Let's button it up and move forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you'll achieve that because there's no more questions on the board. Representative Zarang.
Well, I assumed based on that we were going to move to adjourn, and I thought hard about this, whether or not I would say anything which would lead any credence to the accusations that were made, and I thought I wouldn't. But at this point, I can't let it go without saying a couple things. I think I have a unique perspective in so much as outside the two gentlemen here, but especially on this committee, I have more experience in dealing with this organization and have had the honor and pleasure to serve in both Mr. Klein and Mr. Haas's role, which was very important. But I cannot tell you how upsetting it has been, based on these accusations, to impugn the integrity of this organization, and especially of these two gentlemen who, again, I had the pleasure to work with, who go to great lengths to not only ensure that we utilize, or the state utilizes, the most up-to-date science and technology, and allowing that to establish what are our priorities, how these projects are chosen, and how we move forward. Mr. Klein, you mentioned that these accusations could potentially affect future investments, especially in light of what's going on with GOMESA, how important the dollars are that are so limited and so important to this. I would go on to say not only investments, I think we need to recognize that it also jeopardizes the lives of people, because again, we keep talking about coastal restoration. Coastal restoration is important, and we need, again, we have the most valuable ecosystem in the United States. But this agency is also responsible for flood protection and protecting these coastal communities and the lives of the people who depend on this organization to ensure that we move forward. And the integrity that they have established in the great lengths in having, again, the honor of participating and establishing and setting up this organization, and to what degree in developing that has tried to incorporate or develop an apolitical process, trying to keep politics out of it, because there is no way in terms of moving forward if we allow politics to be injected into this organization. There's no way that we can be successful. I also would say that without fear of contradiction, that there is no other state agency, and please, if anyone knows of one, let me know, no other state agency in Louisiana that has to go through the scrutiny. And Mr. DeVilliers talked about the involvement of the process. There is a master plan that every 6 years is reassessed and has to go through the scrutiny of science, stakeholder involvement, public meetings, the amount of people who participate in the master plan. Who, by the way, has to then go through the approval of the board, then has to go through the approval of 4 committees. There is no other agency that has to sit through 4 committee hearings to get their budget and get their projects approved to move forward. So they do that on the master plan in 6 years. Then on an annual basis, they identify which projects are the priorities, again, utilizing the best on science and technology in one of the most apolitical processes in terms of how state projects are budgeted. Then again, on an annual basis, have to go through 4 committees to be reviewed and assessed, in addition to all the public hearings. So I could go on, and it's just frustrating that we're even here today, but it's beyond the pale that for a cheap political point to be scored, that somehow the integrity or the good work that this agency is doing is somehow being maligned and can affect that agency. And I just wanted to go without saying that again. I appreciate all the good work that you all do, and all the good people. I know some people here from the agency are here, but who work harder, again, with considering the biggest budget and the amount of people that are employed within this agency. I think they're the most productive state agency on a per capita basis, the number of people and the size budget that they oversee in terms of their ability to produce these projects that are going to protect not only this valuable ecosystem, but the people who live here in Louisiana. And again, I want to thank you for doing it with integrity, doing it with your ability to ensure that these projects are in the best interest of the people and the state, to ensure that these very limited dollars are put to good use to protect and preserve the people and the ecosystem of Louisiana. And I want to thank you all, and I just apologize for y'all having to bear through this, but thank you all for what you do.
Thank you, Representative Zerang. Representative Billiot.
Similar to Representative Zarang, it just would have happened when I'd have walked out the door. I would have said, you know, why you didn't mention this at all. But I just need to say that, you know, when we talk about all this, the whole country's watching. We've been just about completely around the world to put things together right after Katrina and all, to make sure that we had the best system in lines of what we wanted to move forward with. So when we go up to Washington and we go to other parts of the country to try to get money to do what we need to do, this board is great, and we don't need people trying to tarnish our record here for the great things that y'all do for us. And exactly was Representative Rain said, we're out the picture of what's really is the lives out there that are important to us. And if anybody goes to these presentations, they're going to see it's not just about sitting here at these committee meetings. It's about the livelihoods of these people and myself that are out there, because I live there also, like Truck and the rest of us that live along that coastline. So it's important to all of us, but I just let the people know that, you know, we definitely stand behind this board and our governor when it comes to this type of situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your time. We really do appreciate it.